Hi, this is Lynn Schnebley with Educating with Wisdom, and I'm the ambassador for Heaven's creating and protecting goddesses and archangels over life. And I'd like to say again, Happy Father's Day for all of you that are fathers, adopted fathers, grandfathers. This person here is Udo Staba, and Udo Staba is my former husband. He is the father of my 2 adult children. And like myself, Udo was completely traumatized and torn apart by what happened to me and to us, and it is due to the false paradigms that have been taught through the church and through society. Udo was a very educated person, but to give you some idea, it does in fact center around the whole Garden of Eden story, nudity. Yeah, because he was a nudist. All right. Driving women crazy, blaming women for when they're sane, and doctors giving him the right to engage in this behavior, and when it was questioned, then to completely project blame. And the reason why I say this is because Udo is also a victim of that completely false paradigm. And I'd like to go in and show you something. When he was taking off and leaving without telling his children, because his faculty had told me, I called Udo and I said, because I knew this was a karmic setup with God. And I called him and I left him a voice message because I knew he was leaving the country and it may be that he was just leaving for good. And I said, Udo, when the time comes and you die, go to heaven and review your life with God, and I will try to make something good come out of this mess. And that's what I said to him. So let me go in and show you, and to give you some idea, not only did his faculty support me, but it ended up going to the American Academy of Management, and they did a job that the church refuses to do, and the church is part of that. This was all, and I had spoken to them on the phone. Udo was in New Zealand at Christ Church, all over the internet as this great academic, and in support arrears in the tens of thousands of dollars. We didn't have reciprocity in the United States. His daughter had an autoimmune disease, and it was actually a friend of my brother that said that I need to put him on the internet. It's a former university professor that I had, Andy Piankos, who left the country and did the same kind of thing in Tobago. And he got posted, and it ruined his life and his career. So what happened, I'm going to take you to August the 30th, 2010, because 5 days later, there is, it's actually the 4th of September, there is the Category 3s that are occurring. So all of this is very real. And you had 4 sets of, excuse me, not a category. We're not talking about hurricanes in this regard. We're talking about earthquakes. Christchurch 7.2 on the Richter scale on September the 4th, and I knew that this was either a Jupiter or I thought it was a Uranus event. As it turns out, the 4th is really not about Uranus. It's really about the family and Christchurch. And it's the 4th house. So all of this is absolutely real, and that whole area had 4 over 6 earthquakes, 1 every 4 months, like over each block being a 4-month block, 1 super 6+ earthquake. And when the last earthquake of that one occurred, I'd already whistleblown and told G4S, and this, all the information landed on, I guess, Obama's desk, because that's when the cyber stalking began. And that was in, I first whistle blew in October the 20th, 2011, and that's when they got all that information. And I was hacked into by the end of that October. And that is when the fires, the dry spells began. So we went from the earthquake in Christchurch to the dry spells that began then in the California and the West. And you're going to see that there is this punctuation, and I haven't put it online yet, but it's coming. So I'm going in to take a look at Udo. Did I click out of Udo's? Well, I hope not. Oh, Udo Stave. And if we go into his literature, fictional literature, oh, here he goes. Here was his education. I met him at Cornell when he was finishing up there. We lived, I didn't know he was visiting there. He was not back at Christchurch, although he was being listed as Christchurch, but he wasn't. This is when he took off and he left Germany when we caught up to him. But here we are. Where did I meet him? I met him here. We moved here. We were here. And then we were here. And we divorced at the very end of December the 30th is when it became final, 1999. And that's when he took off. Okay, so there we go. Let's take a look at how he's been traumatized. And here, let's see, this is when the Christchurch incident occurred, and he's gone after 2011, but he's still being listed there. It's very interesting for a long time. So I'm not interested in his academic journals at this point. I want you to see his fictional literature. Udo is traumatized into believing, let's see if I can get this into English. I guess I can't. Can I get this into English? His fiction is actually traumatized into believing that I need to be, and he calls me Ellen. This is how he's working it out. That I'm rather psychopathic and I'm part of a psychiatric issue for him. And he's got incidences of Christchurch that are here. And he has more incidences of more Ellen, his crazy wife. And he's just, and Mythos of New Zealand, because he couldn't go back to there because of his behavior. And when the Academy of Management showed up and his arrears was up on his front page, I'm really surprised anybody in Germany took him. I don't get that at all. And I think it only happened because of, I think G4S and that helped him out, because I had whistleblown and had included him, and I can't imagine the Germans took him. He was in arrears, and I could have gotten arrears from the Germans, but he was still being listed as Christchurch. You know, the men are ugly. The Brotherhood of Men is a very, very ugly demonic institution. So it just continues. And his children, everyone alienated. His daughter has an autoimmune disease, but you know, the Brotherhood of Men, it doesn't matter to them. I'd like to show you something about mind reading so that when I talk about what's going to happen, now we're going to move into what this judgment, the review of your life. And I said, because you can do this, and because you know right from wrong, even if your clergy are teaching you the wrong thing, even if the doctors are teaching you the wrong thing, you still know right from wrong. And so if they are reporting their ability to do this here, and I'm telling you that they've been doing this and worse to me much longer, and in fact, Micah lets you know, and they tried to corrupt me constantly. And now they are gathered on you, nations. This means lords, many ones. Rabbin means lords. And one saying, she shall polluted, she shall be corrupted, and she shall perceive in Zion eyes of us. And that means I'm going to know that they're looking at me. And this kind of perception is almost, she shall perceive, I will understand. There's a form of clairvoyance. It's almost a spiritual understanding. In Zion, in weapon, eyes of us. And that is exactly what happened to me. All right. Except, and remember, there's the picture of the rainbow portrait of Elizabeth, and there are eyes all over her, all over me, and all over everything that is in me. So now that you understand that you are putting nanotechnology into people, and you can use lipids, you can put it on a Band-Aid, you can put it in people's food. There's all kinds of ways you can electromagnet people. You can get this information into them so that they can be read and controlled. And when we do the mind reading, there's also areas of projection of emotions and a projection of vision. A projection of emotion and a projection of vision. So I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm going to get the weather down, and this is Tisha B'Av and Adad, but I'm pretty sure that I understand what the judgment is like. Now, I've had things like when St. Paul, and I call him St. Paul. Remember, I've told you I've only had experiences with men. Okay, male figures. And they're telling me that's because there really are female figures, but we're the ones that are going to lay the boom down on you in this regard. Because they are accountable. They are doing what we told them not to do. So basically, you're doing what they told you not to do. And that includes Paul. And you don't believe in Paul. But that was the experience of Paul that came through to me. And if you can put feelings into people, read people's emotions, and once you put the nanotechnology or whatever you put into them, and you have all that Wi-Fi swirling around them, on top of what you're doing with media and everything else, but the ability to project feelings and to destroy people. And I already showed people last year how online they're using beats and Wi-Fi to destroy women's fertility. This is actually coming from the men's groups, the misogynistic men's groups. But being able to project feelings and fears into people and weaponizing all of this technology and what you're doing to the earth. Let me explain what that Mary of Magdalene is. When I got the Elizabeth, the understanding that I was Elizabeth, this had been gradual, that began as a teenager and worked its way forward. And there was greater and greater understanding. But I didn't feel the need to go out and do anything about it, because one, I wasn't taught about reincarnation, and two, so what? I mean, it didn't matter, and I didn't have any need or any feeling that I needed to go out and act on any of these things. And likewise, Mary of Magdalene, they said, oh, well, she was a prostitute and she was this and she was that. And I never gave it much thought. And then as I began to look at it in the Greek and as I began to research it with everything going on with G4S and the whole thing with the Lost Book of Nostradamus, I said, my goodness, I think I know what I'm looking at here. And I was right. I did know what I was looking at. And after Paul came to get me. Now, my birthday's December the 12th, and so that is supposed to be the Guadalupe. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've never had a Virgin Mary moment. I've never had a Virgin Mary anything. I believe the Virgin Mary and a lot of things were made up in order to bring women in to get them to pay for what men wanted them to do and the religion that men wanted them to have. And I've discussed that at length before. And it was very popular, and Islam picked up on it because it was such a popular thing, let's make her that. Yeah. Alrighty. But I didn't. I had Mary of Magdalene moments. And which is interesting because the church did not have that Mary of Magdalene anointed Jesus's feet. And of course, I have the anointed. I've been baptized and anointed and confirmed all together 4 times. 2 confirmations, 2 baptisms, as well as a submersion with the Baptist brethrens, and many other things, all the signs. But getting back to the anointing, that thing with Mary Magdalene was visceral. And so when we talk about what the judgment, what the review of the life is going to be, just as you work in stealth, These abusers and these men in charge work in stealth. You don't know how they're hitting you, how they're taking from you, how they're taking over your life. Micah discusses that as well. Let me come out of this and hold on. Let's go to 5. And this is not translated correctly at all in Greek. By the way, there's no Moses mentioned in Daniel, Hosea, Amos, Micah. I don't know all of these. Isaiah, nothing about Moses. And there's, in fact, no Moses. There's only a Mesha. But let me go back into Micah. And the last 2 are actually added after the fact. So these are clearly more Hurrian. All right, and I cut off enchantments from hand of you, and one's clouds, not they shall become you. And so one's in the clouds and one's using the clouds, and the enchantments and the whole Chaldean Kabbalah movement. In fact, the black box of the Kabbalah, of the Kabbal, is like the black box that Jewish men wear on their head and on their arm. And this is going to be a different topic. All right, so that's there. So let me talk about that experience coming up, because I've already discussed what happened, what they did to the cruise control, and I already discussed what happened when they turned off my electrical system up at the altar after that crazy priest couldn't even teach the right lesson about marriage and creation and how to make it open to gay and transgender people. I mean, it's wacky. Okay, and I just died, dropped right there. They brought me to the emergency room. My electrical system turned off. And then, of course, the Boeing, I do a prediction, and it happens to the Boeing plane 3 times. So let me talk, fire Trump on June the 14th in England twice. We know what this is about. But the Mary Magdalene, so that you understand what's coming up. Because especially the people that are doing this cyber warfare and this internal psychological warfare on people, as well as the clergy and the scribes who refuse to own up to the truth, what's going to happen is what happened to me. When Mary Magdalene came through me, and it was in August of 2019, it was shortly before Dorian hit. It was like, I think I was still picking my girl up from school, not the one I tutor with. Yeah, now I'm a tutor. And so that would have been like the 3rd week, the end of the 2nd week of August. When she began school. Yeah. Yes, I was going to school, so school had begun already. And it was right after that then Dorian began. But I was going to their place, and it was about school, and I began to have this experience. Remember I said the conversation I had with Paul was out of the blue. He just came through me, and it was a man's voice, and said, and now we're going to discuss this. And I said, well, I don't do Paul. And he said, I wasn't thinking about Mary of Magdalene or any of these things. I'm driving my car. It may have been, I guess, maybe it was going to the girls' house. I can't remember, but it was right around the time that everybody was going back to school in August. And I had this, I didn't see it. Like there was no vision in my mind. No vision. So it's not like a third eye and I saw it. I had the emotion and an understanding that I was at his feet, sobbing, uncontrollably sobbing. And I'm sobbing in my car. And when I really allow myself to think of it, it is horrible. Now I've gained better control over it since then, but it was so bad that I couldn't even think of going to Israel. I couldn't think of going to Jerusalem. Not at all. I still can't think of going back to St. Paul's church. I can't think of going. I couldn't think of going to Jerusalem, except that I have to go to Jerusalem now, and I agreed to go in order to fulfill that prophecy. But for 2 years, no, a year and 3 quarters, I couldn't even contemplate it. Not at all. It was such a visceral experience. What I understood that had happened was, and it went right through me, and the understanding went right through me. You don't understand. I didn't see it. It was as though I was walking through the entire thing with my eyes closed, not seeing it. But all of the emotions and all the rest of the experience was in every cell of my body. Yeah. So, for those of you who have lied about these paradigms, and you've lied about these things, for those of you, Martin Luther King Jr., my father, and his hardness of heart with abortions and everything else, he's going to step through the abortions that his daughter had. these priests are going to be stepping through these things. You don't have to see anything. Just like you attacked women and the earth through these paradigms. God the Father, heaven doesn't have to show you a thing. They can hit you with the understanding of these emotions left and right, and the repercussions of these emotions, of what you've done to other people. And it will be visceral. It will be debilitating. This is not something that's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, because of what you've done, what you've been willing to do, the primary blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, they can put you into the toxic waste that you helped to correct, and they could make you an animal that's there. You have no idea what because of what you can do, their gloves are off. They're off, babe. They're just completely off. What they did to me, I mean, when they gave me this karma, this understanding, when I moved from being just one thing to the next, was a horrible, 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 horrible experience. Horrible. And when I tell you, Jesus was revolutionary in terms of what he was doing with the society, both at the temple, and what he was doing with the society, both with Rome, and what he was saying regarding God. And it was so important that three times in the New Testament, it says a man will leave his mother and father, will cleave to his wife. So I ended up in Ephesus because it was the safest place a woman could go to. And it was a sanctuary city, and it was female friendly. So, just as I didn't see what was happening to me, and as other people can't see what's happening to me, and you're hitting them blindsided, you are so diabolical, and the people that are supposed to be the scribes and the priest and the clergy, valor, they have no valor. They have nothing. They nothing. And all of the women of these 14 and 1500s that were queens, none of them would back any of this church anymore. And they won't. I don't. On their behalf, we don't. We just don't back you at all. It doesn't mean that we don't back the teachings of Jesus. It doesn't mean that we don't understand these things, but we also understand who were the original Hurrians. And I don't mean the Hurrians of 2600 BC. I mean the Hurrians of before then. With my abortion, and I had it really early on, and that was a late, this is coming to Udo, and it wasn't Udo, it was with somebody else. Anyway, to make a long story short, and my father condemned me left and right for all kinds of things, and he still does, But to make a long story short about Udo, at Cornell, I wasn't going to see Udo. I said, he's a German workaholic. He's looking to get married. I mean, I knew that when I met him. I don't know how I knew that. He kept talking at me at the bagelry, and I said that I went home at Thanksgiving, and I said to my folks, I'm not going to see him. I'm not going to date him. He wants to get married. And less than a year later, I'm pregnant. But to make a long story short about, and it's not a short story, I realized that already, but because it's about fathers and Father's Day, and that when Udo, I actually ignored walking past him, and then I was ignoring all kinds of things. And I was trying to, and then in March of 1982, I told him that I was really done seeing my former fiance, like I really wanted to break it off. And I explained what happened. And Udo was finishing his dissertation. He had finished it and he was supposed to be going to Germany. So I thought, okay, well, this is really safe because he's going back to Germany. I don't have to worry about him being attached. I can just have a conversation. And he said, let's get together. Let's talk. And I explained what happened, and he said, he got really hurt with his first wife, and all kinds of things happened. Anyway, so he invited me to a graduate party for people. He finished his PhD, and a friend of his, Miller, had just gotten her master's from the ILR, and they were having a get-together of graduate students, and he asked me to join him. And I did. And I can remember standing in the kitchen with Udo, and Udo was very alone. He talked to me, but he wasn't really outgoing, and he lacked, as an only child, there were a few social skills that he lacked with other people. But again, I thought he was going back to Germany, so this wasn't any issue. And he was tall and very bald, and I thought he was attractive, but it wasn't an issue for me because he's going back to Germany. And I look at Udo, I'm 23 years old, and I'm looking at Udo, and all of a sudden, in my womb, I had an experience that I had never experienced before. And it was in my womb, and it was love, not lust. This love. I haven't seen my son since 2002. And I looked across and I looked at Udo, who I wasn't contemplating anything with. And I looked at him, and what I heard was that I was going to love him. No, I don't love Udo anymore. But we did end up getting together. He unpacked all of his bags from going to Germany, and my father and my mother were livid that I was going to move away. And to make a long story short, it was horrible between my parents and us. But they turned a blind eye to my brother taking up with a married woman and living in adultery, and they paid for my sister's abortion and allowed her to live with her boyfriend in their home. But for me, who was not living with them but just wanted to live with Udo for a little while, I was being disowned. I was the oldest child. Remember, my brother took up with a married woman and lived with her and brought her to my sister's wedding. I really am the family scapegoat. As I'm getting married, I'm getting pregnant, and 9 months later, on July the 11th, 2083, our son came on 7/11, 7 pounds 11 ounces. And then 5 years later, Chelsea, who was due on the same day as her dad, which was 7/5, as her brother, but 5 years later, she came 11 days after Marius on 7/22 and weighed 8 pounds 11 ounces. Pretty sure. Yeah, I am, because I'm thinking, wow. And so it's Father's Day. And I pulled that together in terms of what you're going to experience and how you're going to be so hit. If that paradigm had not been in place, Udo and I never would have gotten together. I wouldn't be here. It would be a totally different life because the paradigm has caused so many other things to occur. But the fact that you understand as human beings, here, let me help you with this. You understand what you can do and how you take and what people do and what you've done to people and how you've lied to them. And you understand how you steal their lives and what you're doing to their bodies. Why would you think, and why would any clergy teach you, you can just do this and it's all going to go okay for you because you're saving the earth or you're doing what you think you're doing, after you wouldn't even be honest with the people and tell them, because you already know what I'm teaching. You already know what Jesus told you to do in terms of marriage. You already know it was the Hurrians who were the heroes, who were the Haris, who were the Horus. You already know they're the ones who brought the agriculture. You already know that the Greeks and the Hellenists and Rome did nothing but steal and take from them. You already know this. You already know what you could do. Why would you think God would not do this to you? Why would you think? And now the fires and the waters are coming because the real God the Father, not some magical beast that you have in mind, and the real Hurry are here, ready to take your souls. And I'm going to tell you, as the West is burning and as the hurricanes are hitting and as the cholera hits, I have to get out there so that they understand why it's happening. And to prepare their souls so that they can renounce the priest and the scribes and these people. They can renounce them, cleave unto something better, so that as they review their life, well, they're going to be held accountable, because everybody knows that you're not supposed to treat women and the earth this way. You all know it. And the priests all know they're wrong. But you're magical thinking. And so, instead of allowing you to so utterly control humanity, they'll take us first. And they'll take the earth first. And they'll take the trees and the animals. Last year at this time, I cried when I realized what you were doing, and I said, what's going to happen to the souls of the animals? And I was assured that they had a place for them, and they would be taken care of and would be allowed. But they're ready for you. You think you're too big, and you think everyone has to be let in, and I said, everyone's going up. But your review can go on for what seems like an eon as you review what you've done and its repercussions. Udo, I pray that someday you and your children can heal. And I do hope that I can make some lemonade out of this toxic waste with the grace of God. Walk to the fathers for the sake of the fathers. Do not look at the church and do not consider them your father, which is what Jesus. And they don't believe in Jesus, but he said, don't call him Lord. Do not call him Rabbi. Do not call him Father. Do not think of Apollo as the sun or Dionysus, and do not think of the sun God. And I've already said, you haven't prayed to the proper water God, the one over the weather. Anyway, this is a different conversation. We're just talking about Father's Day, Udo, love, understanding my karmic responsibility, even to Udo, who's still writing about me being crazy and calling me Ellen. And I said to my mother, or said to somebody, when he stops writing these books about me, I have to be concerned that he commits suicide. To think that they hired him when he was already in such arrears. How did that happen? Well, somebody set him up for that job. Very interesting. Anyway, namaste. And I'm going to tell the fathers, and even if you are fathers and your relationship is ruined and you are bitter with your former wife, the church is responsible for that failed relationship. The scribes are responsible for that failed relationship. If they start a relationship telling you that you're fallen, you're bad from knowing right from wrong, and you are able to have all this delusion of grandeur regarding your relationship, it's very difficult for anything to go well once they've already shackled you. And that, folks, is not a testimony of love. They don't love you. But I do. There you go. As he would have me love you. So, namaste. I should say I have charity. Harity. The Hori. I have that kind of love.